iScrappers, Tom from the iScrap app. Today is 1 week before Christmas, December 18th, 2019. Now, what we would like to do right now is first and foremost wish you, your friends, your family, your coworkers, your fellow scrappers, your iScrappers, our team, your team, whoever it is that you know and like, a very happy and safe holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, whatever it is that you choose to celebrate or not celebrate, we hope that you're doing it happily. Now, we're doing our last live episode of 2019, as the next 2 weeks have Christmas and New Year's Day, so that'll be 2020, so I guess we only had one more week left. But we'll have a pre-recorded video coming out next week with a couple of ideas and little suggestions on what we think is going to be coming in the month of January and a little prediction for the first few months of 2020. Now, we like to do our live episodes every Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern. So if you're tuning into us today, we really appreciate you taking a couple of minutes. If you're watching this after we do our live report, still, thank you very much for tuning in. We would love to hear any of the questions, see some of the comments, see some pictures of different things that you're doing with your scrap metal, as we've all gotten a little bit of a Christmas present with these copper prices jumping about 15 cents a pound over the last 2 to 3 weeks, which we'll get to shortly. Now, don't forget, if you're a Patreon supporter, you have been getting more updates than we like to send out day to day. We like to send those out weekly. This way you see what's going on with the markets, see a couple predictions, see a couple pieces of news, things that affect copper and some of the other metals. So hopefully you've tuned into that as a Patreon supporter. So over the last week or so, let's go over some of the things that have gone on. We've talked about how the Phase 1 has been agreed to between the United States and China. With that agreement, while it hasn't been signed yet, it has put a little bit of a buoy to the market, as we've seen the stock market hitting all-time record highs. I saw a stat the other day that over 10,000 points has been added to the stock market since President Trump became elected. Unfortunately, we can't say that there's been $10,000 added to the copper prices, so we're just trying to see that rebound happening. But hopefully some of these trade resolutions will start to narrow the gap and some of the price decreases that we've seen, especially in the aluminum markets. Now, aluminum really has not been very strong all of 2019, with some of the prices really dropping lower than seems realistic. We see sheet aluminum prices 18, 21, 23, 24, 26 cents a pound. We don't see much higher than that because there isn't much margin on aluminum. Once you have those tariffs hitting, the aluminum prices for the real low-grade items, and even for the cleaner items like Bare 6063 coming out of machine shops and different applications, those prices have gone down as well. I remember a few years ago, Bare 6063 aluminum approaching or being over $1 a pound, where today we see some reported prices 42, 44, 46 cents a pound. So you look at that and you say, oh my goodness, 55 to 60% of the market has dropped out since those highs a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago. Hopefully we'll see a bit of a bounce back in 2020, but until we get to the first 3 months of the year and hear a couple more positive pieces of trade news, we don't know where that's going to go, but we are certainly keeping our eye on it. And as soon as we hear something's going on, we'll make sure to let you know, like we do every week. Now, we've been watching some of these other markets, the stainless steel market, having prices drop and nickel prices dropping as well. We see 304 stainless steel in the 21, 22, 26 cent a pound range for regular 304. Those prices are very low, and we don't see them rebounding anytime soon either. Now, we're watching these markets, and we're really hoping that, hold on a second, Virginia, can you go see Marek, please? You have your keys? We've been watching these aluminum markets, and we're trying to get a grip on where they're going, but it doesn't look like anything positive is happening right now. So we're hoping that this trade deal will start to loosen up the markets, as we've seen different worldwide markets really taking a bit of a hit across the board, with prices and economies not having the really strong predictions that the United States have. Now, the United States and China, the deal that's going into effect in the next few weeks, we're hoping that that has a real ripple and domino effect across the entire world market, as we see some of these world economy is starting to grow, and being able to get some of those prices driven up, some of the supply chains moving quicker, and some factories opening as well. Now, if you remember about a year and a half ago when a lot of these tariffs went into effect, it's like a big long drama. It happens immediately and there's a big fuss and a hubbub, and then you say to yourself, all right, we know that things are going to work out. How are they going to work out, and when are they going to work out? And that's what we've been trying to figure out. With this phase one going in, that's where we're starting to see things become a little more clear, but we have to really wait and focus in on the future to see where it's going to be going from here. Now, the copper prices have been strong, a little bit of a pullback, 1 to 2 cents today, but that doesn't mean much, especially going into the holidays. One thing that we have seen and heard over the last week, with those big jumps, about 15 cents a pound on the copper prices, large quantities of copper have been booked going into mills, and some mills are now booked going into February, some even pushing March. Now, that is not a good sign, because that means that some of the prices are going to be driven down by the mills artificially, because they're going to have full capacity for the foreseeable future. If they're booked out, imagine you had scrap jobs booked out for the next 10 to 12 weeks. Well, if other people came in and said, we need something done immediately, you would probably jack your prices up really high. Well, the exact opposite effect happens when the market is flooded with copper and people still need to sell, where some of the prices go down. So if you still want to sell, the mill will take it, but their spreads become wider, and that's why you could see a little bit of a pullback at your local scrap yards. Now, not enough about talking about copper and aluminum. Let's talk about steel and iron. Now, don't forget, if you have any questions, prices, ideas, or thoughts that you'd like to share with us, by all means, feel free to do so during these live episodes or afterwards. Steel and iron has seen a nice resurgence over the last 8 to 10 weeks, with the market jumping between $40 and $60 a ton overall. Now, seeing those market increases is very nice, but what we're looking at now is what's going to happen into the first 3 months of 2020. Now, we did hear in the last couple of days and see some price decreases happening, anywhere from $5 to $15 a ton on some of the heavier grades of steel. Why, you ask, such a pullback after such an increase? It's relatively simple. Once we saw those markets really being driven up after being so low for a few months, it's really not surprising, because a lot of mills, again, were rushed with material that people have been holding. Because if you're holding 1,000 tons of steel, like larger scrap yards are, the price goes up 20 or 30 bucks a ton. Well, that could be $20,000 or $30,000 in additional profit that you didn't expect. Now, of course, I'm talking in really big numbers, but that's just to make a point that some of the larger yards that have big piles of steel, those are the blocks of material that they're selling to mills and overseas export markets. So those large blocks of material that are being sold, that's what really helps control up and down some of the market prices that we've seen. Now, we're watching this, paying attention to it. We're looking at the gas prices. We've seen oil jump over $60 a barrel, around $61 when I checked last this morning, which means that it's going to be a little more expensive to move things as well. Why the oil prices are moving, you ask? Well, we've seen some of the OPEC countries putting in a bit of a tightening supply on their output. With the tightening supply going out there, well, it's been able to drive up some of these gas prices, which caused transportation prices from boats, ships, and trains to go up. When those transportation prices go up, they need to be able to take that money from somewhere, and generally that's from the steel and iron market pricing for scrap. Unfortunately, scrap metal is really one of the items that when people need to be able to pull something, whether it's additional tariff money, additional transportation money, it's very easy to take it from the scrap market, because scrap yards and larger exporters have to continue to move this metal. They can't afford to just sit on it. Have you ever seen your scrapyard have a pile of scrap as high as the sky? Of course not. Maybe they're saving some grades of material, and of course they have large piles compared to what you might be putting on the back of your truck, trailer, or even your roll-off, but they are still moving them relatively quickly. You have to figure that scrapyards deal with so many large customers, whether they're demoing a building, taking from machine shops, having a continual supply. So when these continual supplies of material come in, they also have to get sold relatively quickly. And sometimes the scrap price, when it drops, there's nothing that scrapyards can do or exporters can do except take a little hit on the chin, move that scrap forward, and move on to the next deal. Now, the insulated copper wire market, to flip back to the non-ferrous side of things, has really improved in 2019 after seeing a really rough 6 months, the end of 2018. New markets have opened up in such countries as Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, and we've seen some of the insulated copper wire staying local here in the United States, going to some choppers that are harvesting the copper out of it instead of exporting it. Now, these are great signs as well, as we've seen the insulated copper wire prices drive up over the last 6 months because of new supply chains. Now, they might be about 15 to 20% lower where they should be based on the COMEX and the copper prices, but hey, it is what it is, and you can only control what you can control sometimes. Considering that they did drop 30 to 40% below where they were supposed to be based on historical prices, copper recovery, and the current COMEX over that period of time, we are happy with the increase that we've seen as of late. Gold has really remained relatively strong in all of 2019, hovering around $1,500 an ounce the second half of 2019. We've seen the interest rates from the banks remaining low, and we saw some people like Fannie Mae predicting that there will be a record number of first-time home buyers in 2020, with the interest rates being as low as they are. Don't forget, back in the early 80s when people were buying homes, you saw interest rates between 12 and 18%. Now you see interest rates 3, 4, 5% at a top. Having interest rates lower means that you're going to be able to have more building, which also means you're going to have more demoing. Demoing is great for the scrap metal market. Building is great for the scrap metal market. As scrap is always created, you think about cutting a piece of wood or cutting a piece of wire, there's always going to be an end or something that's going to be left. These are the little things that create the domino and the ripple effect that keep the economies moving forward, keeps garbage guys hauling waste, scrap guys moving scrap, builders putting up houses and buildings. These are the economic factors that get all pushed together to a big melting pot and figure out where things are going, from new manufacturing to demoing to get ready for potential manufacturing or building up of different complexes. This is Tom from iScrap. Today is Wednesday, December 18th, 2019. We'd like to thank you over the last 8+ years joining us in our mission to be able to create a more vivid, a more clear, and a more transparent scrapping community. Whether it's sharing prices, videos, pictures, thoughts, tips and tricks, or whatever it may be to help you learn more with your scrap, we want to hear about it so we can continue to grow ourselves and in turn grow what you're doing across the scrapping world in 2020. We thank you for tuning in every week. We thank you for your comments, joining our Facebook group, posting, and helping to grow the community to give a little more transparency on what's going on. From the team here at iScrap and Rockaway Recycling, from rrcats.com, and all of the vendors that we deal with, we'd like to wish you a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, a happy and safe holiday season, and until next year, scrappers, I'll scrap you later.